Hello everyone, my name is Emmanuel, also known as Yatuzo with D&B Academy, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you how to make music like the artists on Liondub International. So before we get started, let's get into the project. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you the project that we're going to be breaking down today. So the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be the drums. So let me go ahead and solo the drum loop so that you can hear that by itself. So the first element that we're going to be taking a look at today is going to be the hi-hat. So I just have a standard hi-hat loop just set on top of the drums for now. And this is all out of the Changing Faces D&B Academy sample pack. So if you're interested in checking that out, head on over to our website at dnbacademy.net. So at the moment, I just have a standard hi-hat loop. This is the Changing Faces hat loop 06. So it just repeats every 4 bars. And I've sent it to the reverb bus, and I have it sitting at minus 4.6 dB. So for the second element, it's going to be the kick. So if we listen to the drum loop by itself, it is just the standard drum and bass pattern. But I have split the sample and I've removed the kick and just duplicated it every 8 bars. For the volume, it is sitting at 0 dB, and the pitch is the original pitch from the sample. So for the main snare, I've also chosen to split it from the drum loop, and I've just duplicated the snare in the position of the second kick here. So as you can see, the second kick is in this position, so all I've done was duplicate the snare so that it is more reminiscent of an amen break. I also recommend doing your fade out here so there's no small clips at the end of your samples. And for the volume, it is sitting at 0 dB, and it is in the original pitch of the track. The only thing that I'm affecting here that is different from the kick is that I am preserving the transients at around 67%. So in order to do that, you can preserve it by having it on the beats mode and then choosing the first option of this drop-down menu here and changing the value of this parameter right here. So that's a cool way to cut those tails of each of the elements inside of the loop and make them much drier. So for the next element, it's going to be a snare layer. So for this snare, it is a one-shot snare from the sample pack, and it is snare number 13, and I've just layered this on top of the main snare pattern, and I have this sitting at minus 4.1 dB. Again, the pitch is the original pitch, and I have no post-processing on it. Now I'm going to move along and show you the ghost snare. Now for the ghost snare, all I've done was layer the same snare that I have layered on top of the main snare, but I've layered it on top of a shuffles loop. So if you're not sure where to put your ghost hits, very helpful to load up a shuffle loop and layer your snares on top of those places inside of the shuffle. The ghost hits are in between the first and the second snare, the second and the third snare, and the third and the fourth snare. And I have this ghost snare sitting at minus 10.9 dB. So the next element is a shuffles loop, and this shuffles loop is sitting at minus 11.7 dB, and it is panned 16% to the right. The next element that I have in this drum loop is a hats loop. It is just a pretty standard hats loop. I've chosen it off of the same sample pack, and it is hats loop number 1. And I have this one sitting at minus 10.2 dB, and it is panned 5% to the left. So for the last element that I have layered here on this drum loop, it is actually another break from the pack. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that sounds like just straight out of the pack and how I've duplicated it so that it can fit with the drum loop that we have going on here. So as you can hear, it's a pretty standard drum and bass loop. All I've done was duplicated the snare in the same place of that second kick so that it fits with the original loop that we have going on, and then I've just duplicated that. So I've just duplicated the snare in that position where the second kick comes in. And I have this sample sitting at minus 2.3 dB and with no post-processing on it. The drum bus does have post-processing, but I just have a image line wave shaper. So this is the wave shaper that I'm using with a mellow curve, and I have a glue compressor after it, so it's catching all those peaks above 0. And that would be it for the drums. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is going to be the intro elements. So the first thing that we're going to see from the intro elements is just going to be the kick roll, and I'm just duplicating the kick here, and I have an auto filter automated so that it starts at 424 hertz and it goes up to 5.52 kilohertz. And I have a auto filter that's cutting out all the low end, which starts at 424 hertz, and then it opens back up to 26.0 hertz. And for the main intro element, I'm using the Changing Faces music loop number 20. And it is in the original pitch, except for the part where I switch it here, and it is minus 3 semitones. And this is just to create some variation within the notes. And for the post-processing, I have an Echo Boy VST, and this is set to the default preset, except I've changed the echo time to 1/64. I've also duplicated this element, and I've added the grain delay preset called minor third up with the feedback at around 95% and the dry wet at 80%. I also have a hybrid reverb that is constantly at 69% wet, with the size at 78% and the damping at 100%, with a decay of 3.50 seconds. So I'm also automating the volume of this channel so it comes in after the main hit of that music loop. So for the next element of the intro, I've chosen a synth one-shot, and I've just duplicated it in triplets. And for the first element and the second one here, I've chosen to add them in at the second part of the drop, but that would be it for the intro elements. All I have on this loop right here is just a bandpass filter that is starting at 362 hertz and it ends at 1.60 kilohertz. I've just gone ahead and duplicated it so that it goes in during the second half of the drop. Now for the effects loop, I've just automated some hybrid reverb, so it starts at 0% all the way up to 49. with the decay set at 4.53 seconds, the size at 50%, and the damping at 50%. I've also automated a EQ weight, so that's cutting out all of the low end right after it drops. So it starts at 31.9 hertz and then it goes up to 225 hertz during the rest of the drop. So the next element that we're going to take a look at is going to be the bass bus. And let me just show you what a bass bus sounds like without any of the intro elements or the drum loop. So it just repeats itself throughout the drop, but I've chosen around 6 or 7 samples for the bass loop. So let me go ahead and show you the first hit. So for the first bass, I'm using the one-shot bass number 3 in the note of C. So I've chosen the sample as a first hit of the bass loop, and I thought it was pretty good just straight off of the sample pack, so I didn't change much. I have this one sitting at minus 4.9 dB, and we'll go ahead and move on to the second bass one shot. Now for the second bass shot, I have it set to the position of the first snare hit. So this is the bass one shot without the filter that I have on it. And all I'm doing is automating the cutoff frequency of the filter so that it is a much lower sub note. And I believe I've just chosen this to fill that empty space between the kick, the snare, and the next bass. So if we listen to both of these basses together, you'll hear that they complement each other quite a lot. So just a small answer and reply from these two bass elements. Now for the main loop that I have on this track, it is actually from the Bristol Tech sample pack, and you can find that on the dnbacademy.net website as well. So for this bass, it is just a simple sub-low modulation, but I thought it was missing quite a lot of mid grittiness and distortion. So for this channel, I don't have a lot of post-processing on it. I just have the fade in of the volume here. So I've gone ahead and duplicated it. And as you can see on this one, I do have a lot more post-processing on it. So the first thing I've done is set a bandpass filter at around 447 hertz with an erosion set to the noise parameter with the frequency set to 5.69 kilohertz, the width at 0.87, and the amount at 68.5. So as you're going to hear, it is just acting as the mid layer of that bass. And after the erosion, I have an image line wave shaper, and I have a thermal with the preset set to slight interruption, with the dry wet set around 70%. After the wave shaper and the thermal, I have a EQ weight that is cutting out all those low frequencies at around 316 hertz. And the last thing that I have on this layer is a glue compressor with the soft clipping turned on so that it catches any of those peaks above 0. So for the sub-low layer, I have it sitting at minus 1.0 dB, and the mid layer, since it is much lower in volume, I had to bring it up, and it is sitting at 6.0 dB. So the next bass that I have here is at the end of the bar. And this one is from the Changing Faces sample pack. It is the bass one shot number 2, and I am also modulating the cutoff frequency, and I have it automated so that it starts at 26.0 hertz, it goes up to 755 hertz, and then it goes back down to 26 hertz. And I also have a thermal on this channel, and it is set to the Beefy Digits preset with the dry wets at around 75%, and that would be it. And the volume of this bass one shot is at around 2.7 dB. I have also sent it to the stock reverb of Ableton. Now for the next one shot that I have here, it is just straight out of the pack, and this one is another one from the Bristol Tech sample pack, and I've just chosen the small segment at the beginning of the loop. So this is what those two bass samples sound like. I believe that they interact with each other quite nicely. This is why I've chosen to put these on the track. So the last element of the bass bus is a bass loop at the end of the bar where the pause happens within the drums, where there's no hi-hats, and I have it set to a small pad and a bass loop. So I'm using this effects loop from the Changing Faces sample pack, and it is set to minus 25.0 dB. And this other bass is from the Bristol Tech sample pack, and this is Bristol Tech bass number 37. And this one is sitting at minus 11.2 dB. So I have no post-processing on this bass loop, but I thought it sounded pretty cool with the effects loop sitting behind it. So that would be it for all the bass elements that I've chosen for this track, and that would conclude the video today. So let's go ahead and listen to the track one more time so you can hear all of the elements that we've gone through. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.